So hi, welcome to another video production from eMoov Towers. This week, quiet in the news I think. Oh no, maybe not. An election was called on Tuesday, so pretty big news. Took us all by surprise I think, including the politicians. And I guess the question for us is, what does it mean for the housing market? And I guess that falls into two answers really. One being, what does it do for the housing market now before the election, which is due for June the 8th, or and are there other implications, I guess, insofar as the outcome of that election? So let me deal with the first thing first. We, within about an hour of the election being called on Tuesday, sent out a survey to 1,000 potential home sellers and buyers to ask them if the calling of the snap election would actually deter them from listing their home or buying their home. Unsurprisingly really, for reasons that I'll go on to, the majority of the people that we surveyed have come back and said that actually they do not believe that there would be any issue in terms of listing their home or indeed proceeding with the purchase of a home before the election. So in other words, in the 6 weeks or so that we've got, people are quite undeterred really. I think the reason for that is because this election is very different to elections that we've had previously, and we've had a few in the last 2 or 3 years. Obviously we had the EU referendum in June 2016, and in 2015 we had a general election. And of course, not forgetting, we've actually got council elections coming up in a couple of weeks actually, May the 4th also, which are kind of going to get lost in all this. I think it's fair to say that this election is more predictable. I think the Conservatives being 20% ahead in the polls means that this is much more of a foregone conclusion. And I think what tends to happen with the property market is that it's not so much the outcome that concerns people, it's actually the uncertainty about what that outcome is going to be. So I think what we saw in the property market in the run-up to the EU referendum, and indeed the 2015 general election, is a lull in activity because nobody could really call what was going to happen. Not to say that this is entirely predictable, this election, but it is certainly, I think, more predictable that it's going to go the Conservatives' way, rightly or wrongly, and I'm certainly not taking a political position. So it seems that my instinct is definitely that there won't be any interruption to the normal state of play in terms of business as usual being the case in the run-up to the election as far as the property market is concerned. I think our survey data tends to demonstrate that does seem to be the case, that seems to be true. I guess time will tell in terms of how listings and sales and viewings and so on, not just with us, but in the market generally, shape up over the next few weeks. But therein I think lies the question, what happens thereafter? And obviously it depends what happens in terms of outcome, but if we assume that the outcome does go the way of the Conservatives, regardless of whether they increase their majority, which I think is pretty likely, I actually think that in the wake of Brexit and all the political uncertainty that there's been, all the rigmarole, including a big dollop of the whole Trump thing, which I think affected the market in terms of, again, uncertainty last year, I think actually what we'll see post-general election is a big sigh of relief from buyers and from sellers. And I actually think we'll start to see a real influx of people returning to the market post-election, so from mid-June onwards, and I think actually the volume that the market has lost over the last 12 months or so will start to be regained. A lot of it depends on interest rates, so it would be very interesting to see what happens to inflation over the next few months. Of course, if inflation's high, interests are likely to increase, interest rates are likely to increase, and if they do, of course, mortgage rates may get a little bit more expensive. That could potentially temper the market in terms of certainly house prices and house price growth, which we're already seeing coming off a little bit. So house prices are still increasing, but the rate of growth is definitely declining. So that's kind of my two penneth, I think, in terms of what I think happens in the short and the medium term with regard to the election having just been called. Let's see if I'm right. Alex?